Hi, welcome to episode 8 of the Baseball Nation show here on SB Nation's YouTube channel. I am Rob Nyer.
And I'm Grant Brisbee.
And Grant, lots of great baseball action to get to with the pennant races winding down. Let's start with what I think is the most interesting story in baseball this month, if not this season, and that is the American League East, where, of course, the Red Sox are dead, Rays are fading, but the Baltimore Orioles, as of early Wednesday morning, when they finished beating the Seattle Mariners in 18 innings, the Orioles are tied for first place with the New York Yankees. And then Wednesday morning, we got the news that they have called up Dylan Bundy, their phenom pitcher, who racked up some amazing numbers in the minors this year. What can you tell us about Dylan Bundy?
Bundy's 19 years old. He didn't allow an earned run in 8 starts in low A. He got moved up to high A, then got moved up to double A. Each progressive start, he got there's a little bit more of an adjustment with each progression. So I don't think he's going to be a world beater, but he should be pretty fascinating to watch. I think the Orioles are just going to use him as an extra arm.
Yeah, he's not supposed to start. Playing 18 innings, fortunately for them, they had an expanded roster anyway. They didn't have to use an outfielder to pitch or anything. But he might not even pitch. It might not even come up. He's going to be a long man, presumably. Or if they get into a blowout, maybe they use him just to see what he looks like. He doesn't figure to play a big role, but still, we all hope to get to see him. It may come down to the schedules. Orioles have had an amazing season, very lucky, I think. They've now won 14 straight one-run games. They're an incredible 27-8 in one-run games. Again, 14 straight extra inning wins, which is near the record. Incredible. They're scheduled the rest of the way. They have a couple more against the Mariners, or one more, Wednesday night. Then they have 6 against the Red Sox left, 4 against the Blue Jays, and 3 against the Rays. Not an easy schedule, but they weren't supposed to be where they are. Anything could happen. I think you still have to like the Yankees to win, but wouldn't it be something if the Yankees had to play in that one-game playoff? As a fan, I can't help but hope that's what happens.
Yeah, it's crazy. If you were told that the Orioles were going to contend before the season, okay, you'd think that's crazy, but you could at least maybe see a path where all of their young pitching just happened to burst on the scene at once, with Brian Matusz or Arrieta or Chris Tillman, or, they all just kind of converged and made this really young, productive rotation. But that's not how it's happened. They've had to patch a lot of holes and fill the roster up as they've gone. So it's not only amazing that it's the Orioles, we're talking about the Orioles in September, but how they've done it, and they're still there, they're still competing against what looked to be one of the strongest, if not the strongest rosters in baseball before the season started. It's amazing.
It is, and I'll mention the Yankees' schedule as well. They play the A's 3 games this weekend in New York. Then they go on the road for 3 against the Twins, 4 against the Blue Jays, and they finish up, and this could be a lot of fun, with 3 games against the Red Sox, who won't have a lot to play for in terms of the postseason. Obviously, nothing to play for, but they might be fighting for pride. So that might be an interesting series, those last 3 against the Red Sox on the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of October. So I'm just hoping the Orioles at least hang in so those last few days are interesting. Otherwise, we'll know what's going to happen. It'll probably be the A's and the Orioles in that wild card playoff, unless, of course, the Angels make a move, and which brings us to our next topic. AL wild card. A's are in good shape. Orioles seem to be in pretty good shape. But the Angels still have a shot, too. They're not that far out. What do the Angels have to do down the stretch to really to knock off either the Orioles or the A's?
I think the Angels are at a little bit of a disadvantage in that they don't play any of their direct competitors. They're all finished with the A's. They don't have any games against the Orioles. So they're going to be playing games against the Rangers and the Mariners, and they're going to be doing a lot of scoreboard watching. Obviously they need to kind of get lucky. They need to have one of the teams ahead of them completely fall off the table. I guess it doesn't have to take a complete collapse from the Orioles in order for them to kind of leapfrog them, but they're going to need help. And it's not just a matter of playing as well as we thought the Angels would play. They're going to have to play as well as we thought the Angels would play combined with someone, just kind of messing the bed, so to speak. So they're not out of it. They still have a chance. It's just not an especially good chance.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of scenarios you can envision. It's just hard to wedge those into basically 2 weeks. If they win basically all of their games, they'll get there. If the Orioles lose almost all of theirs, the Angels will be fine. And then you can there are some combinations that aren't at the extremes that work too. But the Angels do need some help, most likely. They're probably not going to win nearly all of their games. They're good, but they're not that good, as we've seen all season long. They've underachieved a little bit. And it's hard to think that they're all of a sudden going to turn things around just because it's the end of the season. But they're still in it, clearly. They're still in the wild card hunt. But you do really have to like the Orioles' chances along with the A's chances. Next thing we're going to talk about, playoffs-wise, is the National League wild card. And there are still, I think realistically, 4 teams that are in the hunt. The Braves have locked it up, essentially. But then you've got the Cardinals and the Dodgers and the Brewers. Tuesday night, the Brewers beat badly the Pirates in a game that really both teams had to have. That left the Pirates 3.5 games out, and I think that realistically they are finished. Would you agree?
Yeah. I mean, as much as I was pulling for the Pirates even a little bit more than the Orioles, just for the hard-suffering fan perspective, but pretty much done. It's going to be hard for them to leapfrog a couple of different teams with the roster they have and the rotation problems that they're going through. So probably going to be done.
Yeah, I thought coming into the Pirates-Brewers series that really only chance either team had was to sweep the other. And clearly the Pirates are not going to sweep the Brewers. So now if the Brewers, though, if they can win the next 2, Wednesday night and Thursday, they're in it. I mean, they could be 2.5, 1.5 games out with a real shot down the stretch. Not an easy, but a decent schedule. Certainly we didn't see this coming. I think that if you're a Brewers fan right now, you might be wondering, hey, why did we trade Zach Greinke again? I'm not quite sure I understand that, but we talked about this a little bit last week. You really can't operate in July as if you're going to go on a fantastic winning streak in August or September. It just so happens that the Brewers did that, and they are back in it. And with Greinke, they'd be a little bit better off. Maybe not a lot better. I think the guy who took his place has pitched quite well. So it's really hard to say. But the Brewers are in it, and I think that if you're a Brewers fan, that's about the best you can hope for. They should be playing meaningful baseball, at least into the last weekend of the season.
Yeah, and just imagine if they had the bullpen they were supposed to have. They might even be. I'm not going to say they're going to be contending with the Reds because they're rarely going to be an 11-game bullpen swing, but they should have had a much better bullpen based on the names and the people that you were expecting them to have. But yeah, they're definitely in it. And I don't like looking at the schedule that much because when you look at teams like the Tigers, they'll lose against the Royals and the Indians, but they'll beat the White Sox and the A's. So baseball is always kind of funny like that. But when it comes to the Dodgers and the Cardinals have a whole heaping mess of Cubs and Astros coming up. Whereas the Dodgers, they were supposed to start their grueling road trip last night, but it was rained out on Tuesday night. But they have to go through Washington and Cincinnati, both of whom are jockeying for home field advantage. So the Dodgers have just a brutal schedule, whereas the Cardinals, they're going to start getting the bottom of the NL Central coming up. So I would almost give the Cardinals the edge based on that alone. I don't think anyone can match that sort of fluffy part of the schedule they've got.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And Chris Carpenter comes back Friday, and if he pitches well, obviously that would give them a big boost. They're very deep, starting pitching-wise, if Carpenter is effective. Having not pitched all season, who knows? But so far, all signs seem to be pretty positive. Him coming back and pitching well. You mentioned the Tigers. Let's talk about the MVP race in the American League. Last week we discussed this, and you concluded that Miguel Cabrera could win the MVP basically if he did one thing, win the Triple Crown. But it seemed pretty unlikely. I think at that point, Grant, he was 5 home runs off the home run lead in the AL. Well, after a big week, he is now 2 off the lead. He's tied for second. Only 2 home runs. He's got 40. He's only 2 home runs behind Josh Hamilton. He's destroying the league. Well, not destroying, but he's got the lead in RBI, 6 ahead of Hamilton. He is number 1 in batting average. He has as good a chance to win the Triple Crown as anyone we've seen. I'm curious, do you think that Cabrera will be the MVP if he wins the Triple Crown, but the Tigers don't win the AL Central?
Yeah, I do. I think the mystique of the Triple Crown is just too much for anyone to overcome. I don't know what a player could do other than maybe hit 400 or just have some sort of crazy statistic. That might trump a Triple Crown if you're talking about mystique and aura. But no one's done it in almost 50 years. It's going to be way too hard for that many voters to ignore a Triple Crown. Mike Trout's got as much justified hype as I've ever seen a player have. I mean, he's doing things on the field that we're just not used to seeing at such a young age. He's obviously the better defender, clearly the better base runner. Offensively, they're a lot closer than people might think. But it's just when it comes down to the stats that you grew up seeing on the back of a baseball card, if someone leads the league in average home runs and RBI, they're going to get votes. And it might not be fair, might not be what you or I would do, but I don't think there's any way that a Triple Crown winner would not get the MVP, unless it's a situation like, everyone hates Ted Williams or something like that. But that's not the case here. So I think if he wins the Triple Crown, he's got it.
I think you're probably right. I do think that the playoff thing will play into it. If the Tigers make it, Angels don't, and he wins the Triple Crown, I think he will win. What if the Angels, though, make it into the playoffs and the Tigers don't? Even if Cabrera does win the Triple Crown, I think that he might not make. I do think it's going to be close regardless. Even if he doesn't win the Triple Crown, because he's going to be so close to having done it, so many voters like RBIs. But I think it's fascinating. And I'm sort of pulling for Cabrera to win the Triple Crown just because I've never seen one in my life. I was 1 when Yastrzemski won the last Triple Crown. And it'd be great to see one before I die, or I'm 101. So I'm kind of pulling for him just to see it and to see what happens in the voting. I think it's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, you don't care a lick about RBI, but you still want to see the Triple Crown. I'm the same way. I mean, it's something that's just kind of bred into you.
Well, speaking of awards, let's talk about the AL Cy Young Award, which is completely up in the air as near as I can tell. We know voters like wins. David Price and Jared Weaver both have 18 wins. Chris Sale's having a great season at 17 wins. I think those are the 3 top candidates. Would you agree?
Yeah, I'd say it's Verlander, Price, and Sale for sure. I think
what about Weaver?
The main. Oh, and Weaver, of course. Yeah, I would think you got to put Price up there too.
Yeah, I think that. I mean, Price leads the league in ERA. He's tied to the lead in wins. I think he's going to take a little bit of a hit because of the Rays falling off here at the end of the season. But it might come down to whoever wins 20 games. And that could be Price. It could be Weaver. It could theoretically be Sale. Probably not. Verlander, I think, is going to have a tough time. He's got 14 wins. He's going to finish somewhere between 5th, 6th, 7th, I would guess, in wins. He could get a little boost if the Tigers somehow catch the White Sox. But if he has the 4th best ERA in the league, which he has now, and he's 6th or 7th in wins, I don't think he can win the Cy Young Award, even though he's going to lead the league in strikeouts. And really, by most measures, I think he is the best pitcher in the league. He is the same guy who won it last year. I just think that he's got too many handicaps. And I think it comes down probably to Price or Weaver because they have the gaudy records and they have the low ERAs.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I completely admitted Weaver when I was asked is because my notes, what I did is I just ran a quick search of the leaders in wins above replacement for pitchers, and I figured, all the top candidates would be bunched at the top. Weaver's way, way down. He's 20th in the majors. And I'm not saying that wins above replacement is a perfect stat for pitchers. It certainly isn't. But it highlights what I think Verlander's main advantage is his innings pitch. He pitches more innings than any of those guys. He's at 217 innings. Chris Sale's at 175. David Price is at 187. Weaver is at 174. I mean, you're talking an extra, 4 or 5 starts of Justin Verlander, essentially. And I really hope that it's not the wins that gets him, because he's, with the complete games and the innings he's thrown, he's obviously just as valuable as any candidate you can throw up there, and arguably more valuable.
Well, I don't think it's the wins that'll get him so much as the ERA. I think if he had the ERA, like Zach Greinke did a few years ago, like Felix Hernandez, the wins wouldn't be a big issue. But if the ERA is 5th or 6th best in the league, I don't think the wins are going to be enough. Let's move to National League Cy Young. My favorite candidate, as you know, you, Grant, and also perhaps you, the viewer, know, is R.A. Dickey, who is bidding to become the first knuckleballer ever to win a Cy Young Award. Right now, he is 2nd in the league in wins with 18, 1 behind Gio Gonzalez, and number 1 in ERA, ahead of Kershaw, Kyle Lohse, Johnny Cueto, a bunch of other guys. Gonzalez is not that far behind, but he is 6th in the league. So, Grant, can you handicap the Cy Young race for us?
I think it's Dickey's. I think he has the ERA, especially if he leads the league in ERA, he's got the wins. He's got the innings pitched, and he's throwing a lot of innings. I thought if Cueto were closer, that there would be kind of like that mental adjustment that voters would do to say, okay, well, Dickey pitches in Citi Field, Cueto pitches in Great American Ballpark. Cueto had the tougher time of it. If they had to flip a coin, they would have gone with Cueto. But his September's just been too bad. I think really the only threat to Dickey at this point, unless he gives up 8 runs in his next start or something like that, I think the only real kind of challenger he has is with Craig Kimbrel. I think there's going to be that sense of, when Kimbrel's setting strikeout records for rate and that sort of stuff, I think he's going to be kind of a trendy candidate. He's not quite as successful as Eric Gagne was when he won the Cy Young when it came to saves and blown saves. But I could see Kimbrel kind of getting this win behind him just because Dickey's not the strongest candidate, in the past 20 years. So I think Kimbrel might be a dark horse for it.
Kimbrel's a really interesting candidate. My favorite Craig Kimbrel stat, he's not allowed more than 1 hit ever this season. Not a single game in which he's pitched has he allowed more than 1 hit, which is pretty phenomenal. I believe it's the 2nd longest streak in history. But I think that the voters will go for a closer only if he is perfect, basically, or nearly perfect. And I think Kimbrel's blown, I think 3 saves this year. I should have checked, but I don't think that's going to do it. He throws so few innings, not going to throw more than 65 innings this year, roughly speaking. I think that you're right about Dickey. As long as he doesn't have a bad start, the only thing I can see is if Gonzalez wins his last 3 starts, finishes with 22 wins, and his ERA is close to Dickey's, and Dickey wins 18 or 19, that could be a problem. But I think you're right. I think he is the favorite at this point. Let's shift to a completely different subject. Yunel Escobar's eye black. For those who haven't been following it, and I'm sure you have been, but Escobar had a phrase in Spanish on his eye black last weekend. It was certainly could be offensive to gays, and I don't actually have the phrase in front of me, and I would mispronounce it if I did, so I won't say what it was, but you can go on the web and find it easily if you're curious. Grant, I thought you had a great take on that on Baseball Nation. Can you give us a little recap?
Just that I didn't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. That take that I had, big opinions, but there's so much that goes into it. It's not just a matter of pointing at a guy and saying, he did wrong. What he said is, just it's binary. It's inherently evil. This is a black and white case. I think there's just cultural things that it's hard for me to understand, from behind a computer just south of San Francisco. And so I don't really want to touch him. I don't want to. Was it stupid? Yeah, I can say it was stupid, what he did. But I'm not exactly ready to pass judgment on him. I'm not. I'm uncomfortable talking about it right now. I'm like wringing my hands. It's such a bizarre thing, but I feel comfortable saying it was stupid and moving on. And I think the Blue Jays had to suspend him just as a public relations thing, if nothing else.
Well, I sort of buried the lead, which is that Escobar did get suspended for 3 games. The Blue Jays are taking his salary for those 3 games and devoting it to education on those issues, which I think was a great PR move and just a good guy move too. Escobar seemed in his press conference to be not necessarily bigoted in an evil way, you said, just sort of ignorant and insensitive, which is not an uncommon state for baseball players or people in general. So I think you are right. It's really not fair for us to get on our high horses past judgment. Something had to be done. Something was done, and now we all move on. Speaking of moving on, what a great segue. Thank you. There are a couple of managers that, last week I gave out some awards, award predictions, and I included Manager of the Year, and it occurred to me that you could have an opposite of Manager of the Year. You could have a sort of mismanager of the year, and if you use the same criteria but flip it that people use for Manager of the Year, you'd go for the guys who managed teams that disappointed everybody, that did much less than was expected. It seems to me the 2 obvious guys, one in each league, Bobby Valentine with the Red Sox, Ozzie Guillen with the Marlins, and I don't know if you're prepared for this question, Grant, but what do you think the chances are of Valentine and Guillen coming back and managing next year?
I would give Valentine a 0.001% chance of coming back. I don't think there's any way. I think the fans have turned on him. I think the players have turned on him. At least a faction of players, of important players, have turned on him. I don't think anyone was really too wild about him to begin with, and I don't see it. I mean, I don't see how he stays around. He said that he wants to, and he says, as long as they'll have me, I'll be here. But I would think, privately, he's thinking, what the heck did I get into? So I don't think Valentine sticks around. Guillen, I think he does. I think, first, I don't think Miami's like Boston, where it's this pressure cooker, baseball-wise, unless you, say something about Fidel Castro. I don't think they're going to care, enough to storm the front office with pitchforks and torches and demand that Guillen's removed for a better manager. And I think they have enough money invested in him to where they're going to give him, one more shot at least. Valentine's gone. I think Guillen stays, though.
Well, I have to, unfortunately, Grant, agree with you completely. I think Valentine has to go, given just what's happened the last few weeks. I mean, he just can't seem to go for more than a few weeks without stepping in it and creating a distraction. I think that he's certainly gone, maybe even before the end of the season. I'm a little surprised that he's still there. I'm not sure he even wants to be there anymore. Maybe the last week he's gone. That happens sometimes. But I think you're probably right about Guillen. He hasn't been a disaster. The team has underperformed, both on the field and I think, frankly, at the box office. But he hasn't made any obviously stupid moves other than maybe making some poor bullpen choices early in the season. So I think you're right. I think he probably does come back, gets one more shot at it. But, if they don't win next year and attendance goes down significantly, it could get ugly real fast. It'll be something to watch, that's for sure. Well, that'll do it for this week. Do you have any questions for Grant or I or anyone else? Check our Twitter account. Message us at SBN Baseball. You've been watching the Baseball Nation show here on SB Nation's YouTube channel. I'm Rob Nyer.
And I'm Grant Brisby, and we will see you next week.